wanted to get reaction to the breaking news of the ceasefire. Prime Minister Netanyahu confirmed it today and said, or yesterday, and said that, there was some last minute wrangling, but it came through. And we have no one better to do that with than Jason Jones. Jason Jones is right now in Bethlehem, in the Holy Land. Yes, he went there before the ceasefire was announced, and only Jason would do that. God bless you, Jason. Good to be with you.
It's great to be with you, John Henry.
My friend, you are crazy. You are there in the midst of hostilities. You don't care. You go anyway. You have been one of the lone voices speaking out in favor of the Christian communities being decimated in Gaza, in the Holy Land. And you've brought to witness many people, Catholics and Christians, who are suffering under what's been going on there. I wanted particularly to talk to you now about the ceasefire. What does it mean for Christians in the Holy Land?
Well, John Henry, it's the most vulnerable Christian community in the world is the Christian community in Gaza, followed closely behind by the Christian community here in Bethlehem and in the West Bank. And so you're right, I did come here before the ceasefire was announced. In fact, I was hopeful that the ceasefire would happen around prior to Trump being sworn in. And my hope was to be actually in Gaza with the Catholic community and the Orthodox Christian community in Gaza when that was announced. Hopefully I'll be there on Monday. I wanted to be there at least during the inauguration day. And the reason I wanted to do that is I have a lot of friends that'll be going into the Trump administration, and I wanted to bring their moral imagination to Gaza where their friend Jason would be. So I could remind them about the plight of not just the Christians, but the families of Gaza. And so what does this mean? What does the ceasefire mean? First of all, we have to give credit where credit is due. Donald J. Trump deserves this credit. In fact, it was in 2016 and 17 when I was in Iraq, traveling with the Peshmerga as they were working to liberate the Christian and Yazidi communities from the grip of ISIS. Again, it was President Trump that in short order worked to see that ISIS in Iraq was destroyed and those Christian communities and Yazidi communities were freed from the violent grip of ISIS. And now here again, we have this ceasefire in Gaza. So I think that Trump's courageous stance in advocating for the civilians in Gaza played a role in his victory, and he's delivered. So what does this mean? I published an article prior to Christmas called The Last Christmas in Bethlehem, where I argued that not only would it most likely be the last Christmas where there are Christians in Gaza since the first century, but probably in Damascus, where Giuliani, formerly of Al-Qaeda, runs Syria, and also the Christians in West Bank fear for their very existence. But this is very hopeful. And so we as Christians in the West should leverage the influence and the power that we have, which is all out of proportion. And we should leverage this influence we have on behalf of our co-religionists that truly descend from the families that were in the upper room when the Holy Spirit descended and the church was birthed. And so for me, it's a real privilege. I got to spend hours in the Church of the Nativity by myself, and it's empty. Of course, the streets of Bethlehem that usually are bustling with tourists since the war started are empty. And so the community has been decimated because you had COVID and then you had the war. And so you have this Christian community, this fragile Christian community that's been holding on with white knuckles that has been here for 2,000 years, being swept away. And sadly, so many Christians in the West have been cheering on their what's called ecclesiocide, which is the decimation of people because of their religious community. And so we're seeing the Christians in Gaza and the West Bank not only being ethnically cleansed, but their religious communities are being cleansed, communities that have been here since the first century.
That's a very controversial statement to make, because you make it sound then like the Christian Catholics were specifically targeted by Israel themselves, but it wasn't that, was it?
Yeah, well, of course it was that, John Henry, and so many people, I've been on some very big shows the past couple of days, they can't wrap their mind around it. But here's what you need to know. A lot of Catholics have been formed by Protestant media, evangelical media, megachurch pastors that they listen to on their radio stations or on television that promote the heresy, I would even say the apostasy of Christian Zionism, because Christian Zionism denies that Jesus Christ fulfills all the promises to Abraham. It's a new heresy. I've been into several bakeries in Bethlehem that are older than the heresy of Christian Zionism. This heresy of Christian Zionism is violent, it is virulent, it is ethno-nationalist. It really nullifies the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the victims of it are these Christians and the Palestinian community, generally speaking. So were the Christians in Gaza targeted? Yes. Now we know, because they're openly saying in the press, Benjamin Netanyahu aides have said openly, they're frustrated with Trump because they were so close to ethnically cleansing Gaza, northern Gaza. Well, what does that mean to us as Christians? Northern Gaza is the home of the Christian community. And Israel bombed, and this is going to be hard for a lot of people to hear because they have been so propagandized for decades. And so it's almost impossible for so many people to wrap their mind around. But the state of Israel not only bombed every church, every Christian school, every Christian hospital. We had egregious attacks. For example, 2 Catholic women, a mother and a daughter, coming out of mass, were shot by Israeli snipers. And there was never an apology, never an explanation. I had a friend that I brought to your Rome Forum, Khalil. His sister, his father, and many of his cousins were killed by Israel. His church was bombed. His other sister was wounded. His mother almost died. And again, these are Christians that descend from those very first Jewish converts in the very first century. Sadly, so many Christians, hopefully not Catholics as much, but so many evangelical Christians and Christians who attend mega churches find it hard to believe that there are even Christians in the Middle East. And of course, there are Christian communities across the Middle East that have been here from the 1st and 2nd and 3rd century. I even had a very prominent Catholic journalist call me and chastise me for advocating for the Christians in Gaza. And she said to me, they're not really Christians, they've been Arabized. And I don't know what that means, because I know from the book of Acts that there were those who spoke Arab in the upper room. I also know that Arab tribes began converting to Christianity in the 2nd century. So there are Arabs that have been Christians since the 1st century, whole tribes that have been converted since the 2nd century. In the council, when we got the Nicene Creed, for example, in the Council of Nicaea, so many Arab bishops were there. I don't think there were many bishops from Wales or Scotland or England. There were Indian Christians, your heritage, of course. St. Thomas went to India. And what we're seeing is this ecclesia side. I'm going to be even more controversial, John Henry. There's sort of this axis of evil that's waging a war against these 1st century Christian communities. It's Azerbaijan, it's India, and it's Israel. The state of Israel backed Azerbaijan in ethnically cleansing the ancient Christian community of Artsakh. For those of you who find that shocking, you have Google, use it. Put in Artsakh, put in Israel, put in ethnic cleansing, put in Armenian, and you will see that one of the oldest Christian communities in the world was ethnically cleansed, and the media felt that this didn't deserve any attention. In some states in India, one state in particular, out of 320 churches, 280 were burned down. Then in December, Israel bombed 8 churches in Lebanon. The Christian communities in Iraq were eviscerated under President George W. Bush's nose. Most Christians were cleansed even before Obama became president. And under Obama, we saw the rise of ISIS and the brutalization of these ancient Christian communities in Iraq. We see the Coptic Christians suffering in India, the old Christian communities suffering in Ethiopia and Sudan and the Nuba Mountains. These are newer Christian communities, but we're really seeing a war against Christianity, a war against Christians, something that these Christians, and forgive me for my long rant here, John Henry, something that these Christians in Bethlehem keep telling me is, sometimes we think that they care more about the stones of our church buildings than they do about the living stones that are the Christians who live here.
And in case any of you are thinking Jason's talking out of his hat, no one's ever said this before, it's the first time you've heard it. No, he's not. J.D. Vance said exactly the same thing. So this is going on under our noses. No one knows about it. And yet it's the truth. And our brothers, our sisters in the Holy Land have been begging, have been pleading, have been shouting to please, please help them, help the world understand, help especially America understand what's happening to them. And to me, saddest of all, because the hierarchy in the Holy Land, the bishops in the Holy Land have been saying it out loud, and their brother bishops in the rest of the world won't say anything.
People tell me I'm always quoting René Girard too much, but I'll quote René Girard again. René Girard said, that when you stand in solidarity with the vulnerable, you become as vulnerable as those you stand with. And so to stand with the Palestinians is to really expose yourself to being brutalized, to career suicide. I wrote an article several months ago where I said that on the right in America, you can there's a ritual that one can do to get cancel culture to pass over you, and all you really have to do is put the blood of a Palestinian child over your door, and the angel of cancel culture will pass over your house. And I will tell you what, though, I am not going to be silent. My organization, I'm proud to say that we are a Catholic apostolate. And what I love about our faith, John Henry, is that we have no other. And we've advocated for and defended the Yazidi, the pre-Abrahamic people. Abraham himself came out of the Yazidi people. We have armed guards, and we install security cameras in front of churches, synagogues, and mosques where these communities are open to suffering brutality at the hands of extremists, and I'm proud of that. But if people, the thought of me being silent, that the most vulnerable Christian community in the world, Palestinian Christians, is facing ecclesiocide, the idea that I would be silent on this when I run an organization called the Vulnerable People Project, well, this is impossible. I had donors and supporters and mentors tell me, Jason, you need to sit this one out, because when you stand with the Palestinians, it's going to limit your ability to advocate for the Uyghur. It's going to limit your ability to advocate for the Christians in Nigeria. But I don't think I have that choice. I don't think it's my choice to sell out one community in the service of another. In fact, I think I have an obligation just as a lay Catholic man. An analogy that I was sharing with some of the Palestinians that I was meeting with today, as I said, listen, if you throw an Olympic swimmer in the middle of the ocean, what's going to happen to him? Well, he's going to drown. Now, if I'm in my bathtub, what's going to happen? I'm going to stand up, no problem. Now, if I'm in the middle of the ocean with a boat and I see an Olympic swimmer fighting for his life, I can save him. Does that make me stronger than him? No, it means I'm a guy with a boat. And as an American citizen with a blue passport, I have access to a lot of influence and power through my vocation as a filmmaker, through my work as a political consultant. This has given me an opportunity to build relationships. So as a Christian man, as a member of the mystical body of Christ, and Fulton Sheen said that the foundation of solidarity in the world is love for a Christian in one part of the world, for a Christian in another part of the world. And so I believe that to be true. And so obviously I have an obligation to use my little boat. That doesn't mean I'm strong. The Palestinians aren't weak. They're a strong, beautiful community that's been placed in an impossible situation. And I can say this, that it's the most beautiful Christian community in the world. And I know that grace builds upon nature on a person. And I think when you meet the Palestinians, when you come, and I would ask anyone here who can, make your way to Bethlehem and come here without an Israeli tour guide. Come here on your own. They bring Christians here from Jerusalem on buses. They let them get off, go to the Church of the Nativity, get back on the bus and leave. They actually scare them as if this is a dangerous place. I have friends at home worried for my safety. One friend said she has nightmares. And of course, this is the safest place on earth. It's just the most beautiful community. When you walk the streets, when you go to the churches, when you meet the Christians, I say, wow, this is what it looks like to have a community that the grace has been building upon their nature for 2,000 years. And it's a beautiful community. It's a unique community. It's a mystery to me why they suffer so horribly. And they have, obviously, for 20 centuries, they've suffered. But now they're facing an existential threat.
What are their sentiments right now in light of what's gone on recently with the new Trump administration?
Well, I'll tell you their hopes and their fears. Okay, they have a lot of hope. In fact, there are Trump hats with the color of the Palestinian flag that I've seen people wearing. Trump won because of Gaza. I wrote an article called Gaza Saved America because I believe Trump won because of Gaza. Trump and Vance had made some very courageous statements saying that they wanted a ceasefire, that the war had gone too far and they wanted it to end. And Michigan was delivered by the Muslim community. And I believe Pennsylvania was delivered by the Middle Eastern Christian community, the Syrian Christian community to be exact, and the Amish. And the Amish community showed up in record numbers. They normally don't vote. And they were driven to the polls because of the horror of Gaza. And so in a way, Gaza saved America. And I think Trump has paid them back. I hope personally to see a true reconciliation. John Henry, the nature of my work, I have friends that I love that are in the IDF. I have friends that are settlers. I have friends that are Palestinian Christians, people that I love on both sides. I think their destiny is intertwined. I would like, history has planted a lot of landmines in this part of the world, and I think we should remove the landmines and replace them with olive trees. I would like to see a true reconciliation, and what that's going to look like, I will leave to the Palestinians and the Israelis. Now, here are the fears that the community has. Mike Huckabee is someone I know. He's a kind, gentle, holy man. He's a meek man. Meek in its original, what meek really means is restrained strength. I think he's a man that is strong, but he restrains it. He's a gentle man. He's the kind of man I wish I would be, and I'm not. I can come on your show and pretend to be that, but I'm a bit of a volatile creature and with a hot head and a temper. I'm not the best Christian, not the man I wish I would be, but Huckabee's a good man. But unfortunately, because of his ecclesial community, he holds to a really brutal, aggressive, ahistoric Christian Zionism. And he's made statements that are frightening. Pete Hegseth has done the same thing. So there really is a fear. The Christian community here has really expressed a fear, especially in the West Bank, that they will suffer the way the Christians in Gaza suffer. And they fear that although they see a lot of hope in Trump, Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio and Mike Huckabee, they all have made statements that they find quite frightening. So there's a lot of fear, and there's also a lot of hope. Of course, in the Biden administration, they saw nothing but cruelty and viciousness and brutality. Bill Clinton probably forever nailed the door shut on Michigan to the Middle Eastern community with his insensitive remarks that he made, sort of tone-deaf remarks that he made on the issue. The other, where I think there's a lot of hope also, is those who are under 30. I call them the Gaza generation. And, there are those boomers, a lot of you watching this, me, where the young folks say that basically anyone over 30 is a boomer. And so sort of boomer conservatives, a lot of quote unquote boomer conservatives have been spoon-fed propaganda through Fox News and the mainstream media or through Protestant media outlets, but their children they've witnessed a genocide live streamed. And so across the ideological spectrum, from left to right, those under 30, sort of the inciting incident of their political life is going to be Gaza. So in that, they also see a lot of hope, but that there's also a lot of fear. And so many Palestinians I met with are wrestling with, should we leave? And when they leave, they can never come back. And so this is what they wrestle with. Should I go somewhere where I have freedom, religious freedom, freedom of movement, or should I stay where my family has been since prehistory? And this is what weighs on them.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us. You better say a prayer for us while you're there. You're in the Holy Land. You're in the birthplace of Jesus. That's just incredible.
Thank you, brother. Can I make a very direct ask of your audience?
Please.
Your audience has been generous, and LifeSite News and Life Funder has been foundational to most of the great things we've done over the past 4 years. We have several Life Funders for the Christians in Gaza. We're looking at providing therapists. We want to really work with the Christians in Gaza who are suffering horrible trauma. We have a job creation program we're doing here in the West Bank. I'm actually coming to you from Bethlehem Bible College. We're partnering with them to create jobs to keep young Christians in Bethlehem and in West Bank. We also have a food and health program in Gaza. You can go to any of our Life Funders that are associated with the Christians in Gaza and the West Bank, or you can go to vulnerablepeopleproject.com. And I would just really like to ask your audience to support us, because as a conservative Christian, as a Catholic apostolate, sadly, So many of our co-religionists have been on the wrong side of this issue. John Henry, you and I have witnessed famous Christians coming to Israel and signing bombs. You've seen this, Nikki Haley and others. They come here and they literally put their autograph on bombs that are falling from American-made and American-paid-for planes onto Christians who are begging to Jesus Christ to save their life. And so we don't have a big base of support for our work here, serving the Christians in Palestine. So if you agree with us, if you want to make sure that we keep the Christians in the Holy Land, support us at Life Funder or go to vulnerablepeopleproject.com and please support our work.
Amen to that. God bless you, my brother. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, John Henry.
We'll see you next time.